Hello, everyone, and welcome to Musical Headwaters, a podcast where we ask composers about their works, their creative process, and their sources of inspiration. Essentially, what makes them tick as a living composer today. I'm your host, DaiAne, and this is a podcast from the Contemporary Art Music Project Camp team. Today on the podcast, we have composer João Pedro Oliveira, a Portuguese-born composer living in the United States. He holds a Corwin Endowed Chair in Composition for the University of California at Santa Barbara, has taught in Portugal and Brazil, and studied organ performance, composition, and architecture in Lisbon, and has also a PhD in music at the University of New York at Stony Brook. His music includes opera, orchestra compositions, chamber music, electroacoustic music, as well as experimental videos. He has received over 70 international prizes and awards for his works and has published several articles in journals, as well as having completed a book on 20th century music theory. We welcome our guest today, João Pedro Oliveira.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. It's very nice to be here.
We're very happy to have you. So I know you're now in UC Santa Barbara, or that's
Yes.
where you're teaching.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But you hail from Portugal.
I'm originally from Portugal, but from 2011 to 2019, I was teaching in Brazil, in Belo Horizonte.
Oh, wow.
And then I moved to Santa Barbara. Yeah.
Okay, lovely. Yeah, and I read also very interesting things about like you studied outside of music, also architecture. How did that come about that you also had architecture studies and also composition and also organ performance?
Yeah, well, when I started studying the music when I was in high school. I was 13 years old, and by that time, my idea was to become an architect, and music would be something that I would do on the side, like a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And then, as time progressed, things switched somehow.
Yeah.
So I became more interested in music, and I was studying the architecture, and then finally I decided to go only into music. And I studied organ performance, yes, and for until 2002, I also kept a regular career as a performer, and then I stopped.
Would you think that there's any influence of architecture in your musical works?
Oh yes, absolutely. Many things that I learned in architecture are still I use them either as concepts or even as references for my composition work. For example, ideas of proportions, even ideas of defining space, which is what architecture does. Basically, works with space. In music, or when I work with multi-channel works, I also try to define space. And that somehow gets very, very strongly connected to the idea of architecture.
Yeah, and I know that you also have many compositions that are with visuals and with images and sounds and images. Would that be coming also from the architectural background, or did you get into kind of visualization and projection and images from electroacoustic sides of things?
Well, yes, there is relation. That's for sure. But my work with visuals is more recent. I only started working with visuals in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a more recent development. But of course, I mean, all these ideas of graphical graphical construction and how to relate graphics with sound. It all comes back to the junction, so the relation between what I know about architecture and what I know about music and composition.
Speaking of which, I could talk about a piece of yours right away, Tim Shell,
Mm-hmm.
um, which is inspired by a work of Steinbeck's,
Yeah,
East of
East.
Eden.
Yes.
Yeah, and also that it deals with the concept of choices and
Mm-hmm.
how choices influence kind of a sequence of events, and thus influences one's future. How did you come across this inspiration?
Yeah, it's yeah. That's a tricky question because sometimes, at least in my work as a composer, sometimes I relate the idea of the title of the piece to the structure of the piece. So there is a connection between what the title says and what the piece does. So it's a kind of organic connection. So that's one possibility. But there are also some of my pieces where the title does not connect to the music or the construction or the structure of the piece, but connects to a certain period of the life of the composer, basically. And so uh, when uh, when I was composing this piece, I was reading the East of Eden, and that word, the timshel, is the Hebrew word that kind of permeates all the book, all the story. And I was thinking that in reality, I mean, in music composition, we make choices, but in life, we make choices. And so, yeah, and that was in a period where I was making a lot of choices. And so the idea of thinking of trying to make the right choice, having the power to make the right choice, was very important for me in that moment. So Team Shell basically means you can. So it means you can
Ah,
decide. You have the power to decide. You have the
okay.
power to decide between one thing and the other thing. You have the power to decide between good and bad. You have the power to decide between other things. So that was a little bit the idea that was behind the piece.
Mhm. And so when you were composing it, were you very consciously aware of all the choices that you were making during the compositional process?
Yes, of course, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, if somebody analyzes all the sketches, the the preliminary versions, all the path that was taken to reach the final version, it's full of choices. Of course, the title implies that, but it is more related to the spiritual idea of choice. I mean, how we as humans use it.
True. We have to make decisions all the time as living our lives and any process, I guess,
Mhm.
whether it's composition or otherwise.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. And the other piece that I was very curious about is in tempore. I hope I'm saying that right.
Yes, in tempore.
Is
Yes,
that in what language would that
yes,
be in?
Latin.
In Latin. Okay. And I know this deals with the concept of time.
Yes. Well, that piece is a very important piece for me for several reasons, both personal and both and also as my composition process, because it was probably one of the first pieces where I defined more clearly the idea of interaction between the instrumental part and the electronics. So in tempore, I did some other pieces before, but I think in tempore is the one where I sort of the technique got crystallized. Say, okay, this is the what I want to do. And so that is an important piece in that aspect. Um, Also, it is important in the sense that since we work with time when composing, when writing music, and then later on when presenting music to other people, I thought of this idea that came from childhood, that fairy tales. In fairy tales, time is stretched or compressed. So you say you have a fairy tale and say, okay, now the young girl ran away, and then the next sentence says, okay, 10 years after she was living in another place, and there came a man that met her. Okay, so there is this kind of time compression and expansion in fairy tales, and this idea of in tempore, which was a word used by the classics, meaning that we get immersed in time, like time is a kind of a vortex around us. So in tempore was precisely that, the idea of working with time, making time stretch or compress when we listen to the music. Of course, this is very, I say, very psychological, and it's different for each person who listens to the piece, but it's still, that was a little bit the idea.
Yeah. And you also made it with video mapping, which is, I guess, a kind of projection of images onto the screen. Um, you have a video out for this. I'm not sure if that was done. Was it done live? And well, it must have been recorded live. But
Yes, yeah.
yeah.
Yes, the piece in tempore is from 2000, and then in 2015, I think, I decided to add a visual part. But I thought, instead of having a simple visual part that was projecting in the screen, I thought, why not do it projecting directly over the piano? So, of course, the video that you saw is a kind of, a more elaborated artistic way of presenting the piece, but the piece can be performed alive with the visuals projected over the piano.
And did you also design all the visuals and all the pictures that we see? And
Yes, yes, yeah. Mhm.
oh wow, that's like a lot of constant changes. Actually, it was. I mean, how many images is that even in total? That must be
I don't know.
thousands. It's
A lot.
amazing. Yeah. And also, it was not just the projection onto the piano, but in the video, also these visual effects with, for example, like things flying off the keyboard or
Mhm.
transitions from the pianist hands. So that's I guess that would be in post production. Um,
Yes, Yeah, that's post
Yeah.
production for
Yeah.
the video, for that video, which is a kind of
Right.
artificial, if you can say, artificial version of the piece. It's like
Yeah.
visual music piece. Of course, in the live version, many of these things are different because it's all projected over the piano. So I mean, we cannot make the keys change or anything. So, but it's I'd say 90% of what you see in this video version is also present in the live version.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who's not that layman, I guess, in the tech world, I don't know how you even do that. Like, is it programming, or do you have like, I don't know, it's like a movie maker thing? How is that even done?
Well, it's the process is a process of experimentation, like in a lab, for example. So in the case of that piece, that you have the soundtrack already existed. Okay, so the visuals went into a process of experimentation, trying to discover what would be the type of image that would be adapted the best way to what is happening in the sound. Of course, then you use different programs to generate images, different programs to transform images, etc. And then also programs then to compile everything. It's a process. It's very similar to a process of composing a pure electronic music,
Hmm.
except that we're working with images in this case.
And how do you imagine all these images? Is it like you already have a idea of what sounds go with what images? How?
Ah, yes. Yeah, as I said, there's a lot of experimentation. Of course, we have. I mean, I was listening when I decided to make this this visual music version for the piece. Uh, I immediately thought, okay, what type of images I'm going to put there, etc. As the piece progresses, what will be? And then of course then you have to experiment and work with the software to try to achieve those images that were imagined. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work, and then you go to another solution. So it's this kind, as I said, is a kind of a very empirical laboratory type of.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Okay. Um, and is the pianist aware of? I guess for her, she just plays her part
Yeah,
mainly.
yeah. The
Okay.
pianist doesn't see
What's going on?
in a live version. The pianist doesn't see what's happening
Okay.
over the piano.
Right.
So the pianist is just concentrated on the
On playing.
on playing. Yeah.
Yeah. But there was also changes to the acoustics, right? To the sounds that are coming out of the piano.
Oh yeah, it has the two parts. It has the electronic part. It has the piano part, the instrumental part, and they kind of connect to each other. And then the video also intends to connect to to the to the other two parts.
This was like a whole spectacle.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. electroacoustics part, is that also an area that you're very much interested in?
Hmm.
And a lot of your works have feature this aspect as well.
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah. Since I studied in the United States in the 80s, in late 80s, I got interested in electronic music, and I was composing mostly pure electronic music or pure instrumental music. So I usually did not mix them. And then precisely 2000, or a little bit before, between 1998 and 2000, that was when I discovered some relations uh, in the interaction between the instruments and the electronics that interest me. And so from that time, from 2000 till today, most of my pieces are all mixed music pieces, so with instruments and electronics, because I found out some interesting solutions that I have been developing over these years.
Mm-hmm. And this kind of mixing, would it be sort of live electronics? So you alter the sounds of acoustic instruments?
No, no,
No.
I'm not very much interested in live electronics.
Okay.
All the pieces are the electronic part is pre-recorded, so I compose it and pre-record it, and then of course it connects to the instrument in the live performance. But it's all pre-recorded. Yeah, I only use live electronics in, I think, two pieces, no more.
Okay.
Yeah, all the rest
Okay.
is pre-recorded.
Pre-recorded and then played during the live performance, so
Yeah,
mixing with acoustic sounds.
yeah.
Let's
Mhm.
see. Okay. Have you done anything with organ?
Organ and electronics? No, never.
No.
No, it's very tricky because the organ
Yeah.
is already by itself
Right.
a very rich and full instrument. So all
Yeah.
electronics are almost inside the organ.
Yeah. It's such a massive thing.
It's a massive thing. So I'm not sure it would work well with organ.
Yeah.
Uh,
Right.
Maybe I have several organ pieces, but never did anything with organ and electronics. We'll see. Maybe in the future.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah, I also read your list of compositions, and it's such a massive list. I think you have probably in the hundreds the works that you've written, ranging from opera to choir to all kinds of chamber works and solo works. Do you have tendencies like or what kind of ensembles or formations you like to write for, or it does it go with the flow? Let's say.
Um, well, I think, I mean, I have several orchestral pieces, as you could see, but I think my main interest is in chamber music, which in small ensembles, and that's what most of my works are. And I mean, I would say in the last 20 years, yeah, all my pieces were mostly commissioned. So I have to adapt to what the commission is about. Okay, somebody commissions a duo, I'm going to
Yeah.
write a duo. Somebody commissions a quintet, that's a quintet.
Exactly.
So it's a little bit, but since all these commissions, or most of them, uh, of course, I had commissions for orchestras also, but since most of the commissions were for small ensembles, that's what I have been working mostly in my production.
Hmm. Okay. And how do you go about starting a piece? Do you have a compositional process that you follow, or because I'm sure it's very particular and different for everybody?
Yes, and it's also very particular and different for each piece.
Yeah. Okay.
So there is no. I don't have a final answer for that, but it changes very much. So, for example, I'm now going to start working on a commission for an organ piece for Germany. And what I have in mind at this moment, I don't have a structure, but I have in mind several types of instrumental gestures or instrumental sounds that can be done in the organ. So that's what I have at this moment. So it's something which is very intuitive that just came up. Now I have to make it concrete. So, put it in score, and that will give me one idea for the piece. And hopefully another idea will come after. And so eventually at some point, after, working these 2 or 3 ideas, structure starts to become apparent. Say, oh yes, I want to do this, but I want to have this structure. So structure comes afterwards. So so that's one. But sometimes it's the opposite. I say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a piece that starts in point A, ends in point B, and has a certain structure inside. It can be harmonic. It can be, just phrase, gestures, many possibilities. Um, and so that's another way of composing. And there is also possibility of composing starting from zero, and just experimenting. Just say, okay, I'm going to experiment and see what comes up. So, and that is a much more intuitive approach, much less rational in that aspect. So all of these, sometimes they all coexist in pieces, in all my pieces. Sometimes one is more important than the other. Sometimes is another aspect. So as I say, there is no one way, no final
Yeah,
for your question. Yeah.
right. A piece I really enjoyed was Dark Energy. That's written for 2 cellos. Yeah, I really love the sound of it, and also with the images. Really spoke to me. I was wondering if you could maybe talk a little bit about that piece as well, where the idea comes from, and why 2 cellos.
Actually, it's cello and double bass.
Ah, sorry. Okay, I thought it
Yeah,
was.
it's not. Yeah, there is a version for 2 cellos, but it's in the video is cello and double bass.
Okay.
Yeah, that was also a commission for a project, and the idea was precisely that: write a piece for cello, double bass with electronics and video. And so I was thinking, okay, what is characteristic of cello and double bass? They're low instruments. They are somehow, especially the double bass, dark. The
Dark
sound is
sounds.
dark. Well, the
Yeah.
cello not so much, but the
Yeah.
double bass is dark. And also because I am very much interested in astronomy, I was reading about this idea of dark energy, which is a form of energy that we think that exists in all the universe, that fills all the
Yes.
space, that is not light. So it's called and it's called dark energy. So I thought, okay, this is a very interesting idea. So I'm going to write a piece that is dark in the sense of the low sounds and it's energetic. So it's a piece, it's a very strong piece with a lot of energy, and from and that comes a lot also from my influence when I was younger, or the influence of rock music that
Ah.
had a lot of influence in the way I think. So it's a kind of a rock type piece, in the sense there's always something going forward. There's no beat, but there's always something like pushing forward. So that interests me a lot.
Yeah, it's like this rumbling thing that just keeps rolling, and
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, that's great that it's influenced by rock music. That's very nice to hear. Are you influenced by other genres and art forms?
Yeah, well, rock music is certainly one of my influences. But I think probably my biggest influence is Beethoven.
Oh.
And Brahms also, maybe Beethoven and Brahms, and that has to do with the idea of gesture in music, and this idea of levels of energy that Beethoven works masterfully. That you have all these sections with extreme energy, and then they suddenly stop, and then they go back again. The way the gestures succeed each other, where do they lead? All of that Beethoven does. I think that influenced me a lot.
Oh, okay. Like this extremes of sort of dynamics and
Well, everything, all the articulation of phrases, all the construction of gestures, uh, all the yeah, I mean the way he creates tension in music, and sometimes tension that doesn't stop, that lasts for very very long periods of time, which is somehow I would say similar to rock music, because you have all these very intense short pieces, sometimes short pieces, but with a lot of tension all the way from the beginning to the end. So of course Beethoven does it much more dialectically by alternating tension with moments of relaxation. But when you listen to, for example, you listen to the ending of, for example, the Passionata, the sonata, it is an incredible tension that lasts for all the time of that movement. So all of that interests me as a way of thinking about the music.
that's great. I've never really thought about Beethoven and rock music, but I can see a relation there. Yeah, absolutely. And also with Brahms, when I think about Brahms, it's very for me it's quite melodic. I don't know how you hear Brahms.
It is melodic, but it's somehow, well, it's very similar to, in some ways, it's very similar to Beethoven. Okay, maybe yeah, it may be somehow maybe a little bit more melodic in some aspects, but all the energy that we find in Beethoven, it's very similar I think it's quite similar in Brahms. The difference, I think, between the two of them, of course, in my way of listening to them, is that Brahms is much thicker than Beethoven. So textures are much thicker, harmonies are thicker, articulation of gestures is much more heavier than Beethoven. Beethoven is clear in most of the times. It's very clear what you have in the gesture. In Brahms, it becomes, it's kind of hyper emphasized. It's still clear, but it's kind of a, I would say, like kind of a fat Beethoven.
Huh. So also you said gesture a few times. I mean, I had a teacher who was also during my lessons, I was talked to a lot about gestures, and yeah, I wonder about that because my teacher played a lot of Baroque music, and so for him, gestures is huge. And he sees a lot of musical phrases as gestures. And is it also for you coming from maybe it's an organ background that you see a lot of gestures?
Well, I think it comes from musical experience in general, not just as performer, but all the musical experience. When I mention gestures, it's not necessarily the instrumental gesture, the physical gesture. I'm talking about the musical gesture, and defining what that is not simple. It's very complicated. It's very complex. So researching on that, I found that probably the most interesting definition comes from Robert Hutton, who defines gesture as changes, energetic changes that are meaningful, and also Dennis Smalley from the area of acousmatic music, which also refers to gestures as causal changes in the energy. So, so something that goes from one point to the other. So this is what interests me a lot in the idea of gesture, is this energy changes.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can construct a section piece, which is a sequence of gestures. So if you think about that, some can be longer, some can be shorter, but all the energies they propose, the energy changes that they propose, can lead precisely to constructing like this arch that makes a phrase, a longer phrase, or even a section of a piece. And I'm very interested in the idea of gesture, especially in the relationship between the instruments and the electronics. So, as I said, most of my pieces are mixed. So I thought about how can I connect instrumental parts and electronic parts in an organic way that makes sense. And I found out that through gestures, that is an interesting way of achieving that organicity. So think about, for example, think about a gesture of, 5 seconds that goes from point A to point B. For example, dividing this gesture in two parts, where the first part is done by the instruments and the second part is done by the electronics. So instruments go to the electronics, but the gesture is only one. So you don't see the separation between the two, but you see an organic connection because you hear the gesture from point A to point B, but there are two different parts that constitute that gesture.
I think if I understand is the gesture is point A to point B, but within that gesture there are two elements.
Yeah, there can be two or more. I mean, it can be more very different elements. So instruments, electronics, or instruments, electronics, instruments, all of that. But the way they connect, they become organically related to construct the gesture, or sometimes a phrase, a longer phrase, etc.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and then you can build gesture after gesture into a long stream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or longer gesture. Sometimes, or sometimes a gesture that is no longer a gesture that becomes just textural. So something that starts with a lot of energy and then the energy doesn't change, stays static.
Okay.
So it becomes a texture. It's no longer a gesture. So you go, you have all these possibilities. You go from gesture into something that is no longer a gesture, a texture, and stays there static. And at the end, there's another gesture to finish it. So you have all these possibilities of molding energy.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's great to think of it like that. That's like kind of changing hands of energy and
Mm-hmm.
or
Yes,
or not, and then it's static.
exactly.
Cool. That's very cool. I'll take that. It's good to think of it like that as a performer because sometimes you feel like you're just endlessly giving energy sometimes, but if you do break it down into gestures, it might be a little bit more energy saving.
Well, it's controlling energy basically.
Yeah.
How are we going to control the energy, and how? Of course, this is done from the perspective of the composer, but we expect that from the perspective of the listener, what we intend to do will also be understood. I mean, will also be become part of the listening experience.
I have another piece that I would like to talk to you about, the title of which is Things I Have Seen in My Dreams.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a visual work. When I watched it, to me, it seemed almost like a mini movie in some ways, because it came out with a title, and then its images morphing into further images, and it's this artwork that you see on the screen. Yeah, would you like to talk a little bit of how you went about into creating such visual works? And I know the inspiration is from dreams of yours that you've had.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. That is. Yeah. It's a kind of a strange piece in that aspect because there was no. When I started composing it, I was remembering images that I saw in my dreams, basically, and as I was composing it, I got so involved in it that I continued dreaming images.
Okay.
Very strange. It's really very strange. So
Huh.
you start to compose a piece which has to do with dreams, and then you start dreaming about
Oh wow.
what you are composing. So I
Yeah.
would see images in my dreams, and so it was a kind of a process that uh,
Self-realized.
yeah, and self feed. There was a
Yeah.
feedback.
Right.
So that's yeah, that was yeah, it was a piece that was intended to do that. Of course, not all of it is from dreams. I mean, there are things that I invented, of course, but many images are from dreams. And then, of course, there is the. We go back to the question you asked me before: how to connect sound and image, and of course it had to do with the idea of gesture that I talked about, and also with the idea of finding out the best, the most accurate, I would say accurate, imagined, intuitive representation of sounds in the image or the image in the sound. And well, it's a complicated process. We don't have time here to explain it all, but let's say it's for example, the piece uses a lot of particles, particle displacement. So, for example, particle in visuals can be equivalent to granular synthesis in music. So many particle displacements were connected to um, you know, granular synthesis, for example. And yeah, and of course, we talked about gesture also, but it's this is a kind of intuitive. I call it informed intuition process, where you see an image and you think, what is the best sound that goes with it, or the opposite. You hear a sound and say, what does this sound represent to me as an image? And so that's how the connections between the two are made.
So they sometimes it's the sound inspires the image, and sometimes it's the reverse.
Yeah, yeah.
I see.
Or sometimes you think a lot, you think immediately, oh yes, this is the image with this sound. So it's the same thing as before, as I told you before. There is no strict path. Sometimes is sound comes first, and then image for the sound. Let's build an image for the sound, or vice versa. Image comes first. Let's make the sound that goes with this image. Or it's I know exactly what I want at this moment. I know what image I have and what sound I will have.
Now, with the example of this piece, then the music element is completely electronics.
Yeah, it's all synthetic. Yeah.
It's all synthetic. Okay.
Well, actually, no. Actually, not all of it. There are some voice sounds that I recorded from my niece, and those sounds then they were transformed basically.
And with the electronic sounds, you build them on a computer, for
Yeah,
example.
yeah,
Okay. So it's like a almost like an art installation in some ways.
yeah. It's you can call it a moving art
Yeah,
installation.
like I can imagine walking into a room with the images being displayed and just hearing the sounds coming from all sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I could see that very clearly, actually. What is fascinating to you with about electronic sounds?
Oh, I like a lot this idea of having a sound that I can build from zero. That is okay. If you write for violin, I don't know what instrument you play.
Yeah, I play the cello.
You play the cello. Okay.
Yeah.
If you write for cello, okay, you know immediately that there is a kind of a template that is the cello sound. Okay. Of course, you can use extended techniques. You can use you can try to change the cello response to the stimulus. Okay. But it's still there's a limit to that. Okay. In electronic music, there is no limit. You can think about okay, I'm going to build a sound from zero, from scratch, and that will be a sound with certain special characteristics that I want to put there. Which, of course, with instruments you can do that, but you're limited to what the instruments can do.
Is there something you would miss about having instruments that you can't get from electronics, for example?
Sorry, I could not follow the question.
So, would there be, are there things that you would miss about having acoustic instruments that you wouldn't be able to access as easily with electronics?
Well, it's different somehow, because if you work just for acoustic instruments, you have to think what are they capable of. So, and you explore that the best way. For example, I have a piece called Spiral of Light, which is a string quartet piece. And at that time, exactly in that same year, it's a piece from 2005, if I'm not wrong. And in that time, I composed a pure electronic piece before. And then I got this proposal for a string quartet, and I thought, okay, I'm going to do a string quartet version of that electronic piece. So that was the original idea.
Oh, I see.
So I started working, and of course, then as the music progressed, it's changed into something completely different. It's no longer it was not possible, and so I changed it to something. But still, the idea that I had, I kept. That is, I'm going to make this string quartet sound almost like if it is an electronic music. So you don't have the electronics, but still you have the idea of the electronics transposed to the string quartet. And some parts, if you listen to some of parts of that piece, they really sound almost like electronic. They go further. The string quartet kind of goes further from what the string quartet usually does. So that is, to answer your question, yeah, you miss something, but you gain other things. So you have other possibilities.
Different palettes, I guess.
Yeah.
And another question for you. What are you working on now?
Oh, I'm now working on a very large project of an opera in
Oh, wow.
visual music. It's a visual music opera. So there are no singers on stage. Everything is pre-recorded and manipulated electronically. And the images are also computer generated. Most of them are computer generated images. So, so that's what I'm working now, and it will be for still 8 or 9 months more until it's finished.
Wow. And are there any performers on stage or
No,
none at all? Okay.
not at all. It's
Wow.
just the visuals and the sound.
Oh,
Uh,
wow. Okay.
I'm thinking of making a version afterwards, a version with performers.
Okay.
But this version was, if you want to call it, was a COVID version. That was a
COVID, yeah.
it's a version for just the audience and the screen and the sound around. It's like almost like a movie, but it's a kind of special movie.
During the recording process, I mean, are there performers involved? For example, singers and
Just singers, no instrumentalists, but there are singers. Yes, all the dialogues, the vocals, etc. They are recorded by singers, and then with that material, I work on the final, say the final version.
oh wow. And are there people on screen? Um,
A little bit.
a little
There's
bit.
yes. This is there are some sections where there is an integration of the computer generated images with with live people. I would say. So you have a little bit of that, but most I'd say 70%, 80% of the work is purely computer generated.
Oh wow. What's the story inspired by, or did you write the story, or is it following
Yeah,
a
it's inspired. Well, it follows the book of the prophet Daniel in the Bible,
oh okay.
which has several parts, and some of the parts are events that happened in that time and that they are described by the prophet. So uh, when his companions are thrown into a pit of fire and they come out and nothing happened to them, they did not burn, or Daniel is thrown into the lion's den and nothing happens to him, is saved. So there are these stories which are part of the historical part, and there are the prophecies which are very interesting. I'd say even somehow very strange. So I'm trying to use all of that to create all these different images and all these different sounds. So basically, that's what it is, what the opera is about.
This is a serious subject matter.
It is.
Yeah. And what language is it in?
Well, partially it's in Latin, and partially will be in Hebrew, and partially will be in Aramaic. So I'm using the three languages. Yeah.
Are you like well versed in all three languages?
Oh no, only in Latin.
In
The
Latin.
No, only the Latin. The Hebrew and Aramaic, I'm asking help to, especially to a friend who is helping me to how to say how this is pronounced, and so that the singers will know how to pronounce the words.
Amazing. It's like a directorial kind of thing. I mean, you're essentially producing a whole production.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I know you also you have written already an opera. Is it similar or more traditional, let's say?
It is. Yeah, it's a traditional opera. It's a short opera. It's just 45 minutes long, and this one will be over 1 hour, a little bit over 1 hour. but the other one is more traditional. But also, yeah, it's a kind of in the limit between oratorio and opera because there's very little action, and it's mostly the singing that matters.
And this time with performers.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
there's a chamber ensemble and there are singers, yes, and small choir on the other opera.
Exciting. And where will this new opera be performed, premiered?
There are several places in the project. I proposed several festivals and they accepted. So once it is finished, it will go around. It'll be played in the United States, Portugal, Spain, Argentina, Brazil, I think somewhere else. Yeah, well, there are several festivals that accepted to perform it.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah,
Nice.
first I have to finish it.
Yeah. Sounds like a lot of work, but
It
also
is.
very exciting.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm hugely impressed by all the work that you've done, and you have such a huge repertoire already. Um, I don't know how you have done so much already, but that's very impressive, and also so many awards, like a long list of awards and prizes from all sorts of competitions and composition awards. So congratulations on that front.
Thank you very
Very
much.
impressive. Yeah. It was really nice talking to you and to learn a lot about your composition process, but also ideas and gestures and about electroacoustic music and also visual images and your many different sources of inspiration. Yeah, thanks very much for sharing all that.
No, it's my pleasure. I thank you for the invitation. It was really nice to be here and to meet you, even virtually,
Yeah, likewise. Yeah.
and be
Yeah.
able to talk to you. It was a pleasure. Thank you
You
very
as
much.
well. Yeah. And have a great 2022. This will be aired in a new year. So I
Yes,
hope I hope this year brings many exciting projects and new works along your way.
thank you for you too. That
Yeah,
you may have a fruitful 2022 with joy and health and happiness.
for sure. All right. Well, thank you very much. And this was our episode of Musical Headwaters.